The night the last brother fell. The water is black in the early morning light, not the blue-black of deep ocean, not the gray-black of storm clouds, but the flat, absolute black of water that has swallowed something and refuses to give it back. Ted Kennedy stands on the shore of Poucha Pond, staring at the place where Dike Bridge meets the water, and his hands are shaking. It is July 19th, 1969, approximately 8 a.m. The sun is rising over Chappaquiddick Island, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. The kind of beautiful morning that should feel like hope, like possibility, like the beginning of something new. But for Ted Kennedy, this morning feels like the end of everything. He has not slept. He is still wearing the clothes from last night, still damp in places, though he has changed his shirt. His hair is uncombed. His face, if you could see it clearly in this light, shows the unmistakable signs of a man who has spent the night in a kind of hell that has nothing to do with fire and everything to do with the cold, creeping realization that you have made choices that cannot be unmade. Somewhere beneath that black water, approximately 100 yards from where he stands, is his car, a black Oldsmobile Delmont 88 upside down, resting on the bottom of the pond. And inside that car, trapped in what remains of an air pocket that has long since turned toxic, is Mary Jo Kopechne, 28 years old, dead now, though Ted does not yet know this with certainty. Dead because of a series of decisions that seem small in the moment, but have compounded into catastrophe. He has not reported the accident. More than 8 hours have passed since his car went off the bridge, since he escaped and she did not, since he made the choice, conscious or unconscious, deliberate or panicked, not to call for help immediately. 8 hours in which Mary Jo may have been alive, breathing whatever air remained in that vehicle, waiting for rescue that never came. In approximately 90 minutes, 2 fishermen will discover the overturned car. In approximately 2 hours, a diver will enter the water and find Mary Jo's body positioned in a way that suggests she lived for some time after the crash, that she fought to keep her face above the rising water, that she died slowly, alone, in darkness, still believing perhaps that someone would come. But those 90 minutes have not yet elapsed. Ted Kennedy stands on the shore, and he is making calculations. Not moral calculations. Those perhaps were made hours ago when he chose not to knock on the doors of the houses he passed, when he chose not to use the phone at the cottage, when he chose to swim back to his hotel and say nothing. The calculations he is making now are political, strategic, the kind of calculations that Kennedy men have been making for 3 generations, the kind that prioritize survival of the family, preservation of the dynasty, protection of the name. He does not yet know that these calculations will fail. He does not yet know that this moment, this black water, this dead woman, this choice to prioritize himself over her, will destroy the destiny that 3 generations of Kennedys have been building toward. He does not yet know that he will never be president, that the machinery of ambition that has defined his entire life will grind to a halt on this bridge, that the Kennedy dynasty will effectively end here, in this small pond, on this small island, on this summer morning that should have been beautiful, but is instead the beginning of a reckoning. He stands and stares at the water, and the water, black and silent, stares back. To understand what brought Ted Kennedy to that bridge, you must first understand what it meant to be the last Kennedy brother standing. You must understand the weight he carried, the expectations that had been transferred to him like a burden he never asked for but could not refuse. The sense that his life was not entirely his own, but rather the final chapter of a story that others had been writing since before he was born. He was born Edward Moore Kennedy in 1932, the youngest of 9 Kennedy children. By the time he was old enough to understand what his family was, what they represented, what they were building, the machinery was already fully operational. His father, Joseph Kennedy Sr., had spent decades constructing an empire of wealth, influence, and political ambition. His brothers, Joe Jr., Jack, and Bobby, had been positioned as the instruments through which that ambition would be realized. Ted was the baby, the afterthought, the one who came too late to be part of the original plan. He was expected to support his brothers, to play a role in their success, but not to be the protagonist himself. His father barely paid attention to him. His brothers were affectionate but dismissive. He was Teddy, always somehow younger than his years, always struggling to be taken seriously. And then the pattern began. Joe Jr. died in 1944, volunteering for a suicide mission over the English Channel. Jack was assassinated in Dallas in 1963. Bobby was assassinated in Los Angeles in 1968, just 13 months before this night on Chappaquiddick Island. By July 1969, Ted Kennedy was 37 years old, and he was the only Kennedy brother left. The weight of family expectation, the entire apparatus of Kennedy ambition, now rested solely on his shoulders. If there was to be another Kennedy president, it would have to be Ted. The pressure was suffocating. He was not Jack. He did not have his brother's intellectual sophistication, his effortless charisma, his ability to inspire with words. He was not Bobby. He did not have his brother's moral intensity, his capacity to connect with the marginalized, his transformation from political operative to voice of justice. He was Ted, competent, hardworking, genuinely committed to legislation, but always somehow less than his brothers, always in their shadow even now that they were dead. Especially now that they were dead, because the dead become mythologized. Their flaws are forgotten, their achievements magnified, their potential frozen at the moment of their death and imagined as infinite. Ted Kennedy was not competing with his living brothers. He was competing with martyrs, with legends, with versions of Jack and Bobby that existed only in public memory and that were far more impressive than the real flawed men had been. By 1969, the Democratic Party was positioning him as the inevitable nominee for 1972. The Kennedy name still had power. The memory of Camelot, however illusory it had been, still resonated. The nation, traumatized by assassinations and war and social upheaval, was hungry for someone who represented continuity with a better past. But Ted himself was ambivalent. He had seen what happened to his brothers. He had buried them. He understood in a way that perhaps no one else could, that seeking the presidency was not simply ambition. It was invitation to tragedy. The pattern haunted him, the sense that Kennedy men who reached for power were marked for destruction, and yet he could not simply refuse. The family expected it. The party expected it. The nation to some degree expected it. The machinery had been set in motion decades before, and it did not stop simply because the burden had become unbearable. He was trapped, caught between his own fears and everyone else's expectations, caught between his desire to simply survive and his obligation to fulfill a destiny that had been assigned to him before he was old enough to consent. And on the night of July 18th, 1969, this trap would close around him in ways that no amount of Kennedy machinery, no amount of political influence, no amount of family wealth could fix. Her name was Mary Jo Kopechne, and she deserves to be remembered as more than a footnote in the Kennedy saga, more than the woman who died in Ted Kennedy's car, more than a symbol of scandal. She was a person. She had dreams, beliefs, a life that mattered in ways that had nothing to do with the Kennedys until the very end. She was born in 1940 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, to working-class Catholic parents who instilled in her a deep faith and a commitment to service. She was bright, graduated from Caldwell College with a degree in business administration. She was devout, attended Mass regularly, lived according to principles that went deeper than political ideology. She was passionate about making the world better in concrete, practical ways. In 1963, she moved to Washington, D.C., working first as a secretary for Senator George Smathers of Florida. But it was when she joined Robert Kennedy's staff that she found her purpose. Bobby's office was filled with young people who believed that government could be a force for good, that politics could be more than cynicism and compromise. Mary Jo was one of them, idealistic, hardworking, committed. When Bobby ran for president in 1968, Mary Jo became one of the boiler room girls. 6 young women who worked in the campaign's data operation, tracking delegates, analyzing vote counts, working long hours in a small room that became the nerve center of the campaign. They were smart, dedicated, and deeply invested in Bobby's vision of America. Mary Jo was in the ballroom of the Ambassador Hotel on June 5, 1968. She witnessed Bobby's victory in the California primary. She heard his speech about moving forward, about healing the divisions in America. And she was there, somewhere in that crowd, when the shots rang out and Bobby fell, and the hope of 1968 died on a kitchen floor. The trauma never fully left her. Friends said she became quieter after Bobby's death, more withdrawn. The joy had gone out of politics. The cause she had believed in so deeply had been cut short by violence, and she struggled to find meaning in continuing the work without Bobby. By the summer of 1969, she was working for a consulting firm in Washington, but she maintained connections to the Kennedy world. When an invitation came to attend a reunion for the Boiler Room Girls on Chappaquiddick Island, a gathering organized by Ted Kennedy to honor their service to Bobby's campaign, she accepted. It would be a chance to reconnect with the women who had shared that traumatic experience, to remember Bobby without being consumed by grief. She traveled to Martha's Vineyard on Friday, July 18, 1969. She was looking forward to seeing old friends. She was hoping for closure. She had no way of knowing that she had less than 12 hours left to live, that her death would become a national scandal, that her name would be forever linked to a tragedy that would destroy Ted Kennedy's political future and tarnish the Kennedy legacy. She was simply Mary Jo Kopechne. 28 years old, a woman who believed in service, in faith, in the possibility that dedicated work could make a difference. She deserved a full life. She deserved to grow old, to marry if she chose, to have children if she wanted, to continue her work, to find joy, to build a legacy of her own choosing. Instead, she would die in cold water, in darkness, waiting for help that never came. And her death would serve primarily as a chapter in someone else's story, a stain on someone else's legacy, a tragedy reduced to its political implications rather than honored for the human loss it represented. Chappaquiddick Island is small, less than 5 square miles of beaches, dunes, and quiet roads connected to Martha's Vineyard by a small ferry. On the evening of July 18, 1969, the island was peaceful, bathed in the golden light of summer evening, the kind of New England coastal beauty that draws people seeking escape from the intensity of mainland life. At a small cottage on Chappaquiddick Road, a gathering was underway. 6 women, the Boiler Room Girls, had reunited. Mary Jo Kopechne, Rosemary Keogh, Esther Newberg, Nance Lyons, Mary Ellen Lyons, and Susan Tannenbaum. 6 men were also present: Ted Kennedy, his cousin Joe Gargan, Paul Markham, a former U.S. attorney, and 3 other Kennedy associates. The atmosphere was casual, even therapeutic. These were people who had shared an intense experience. Bobby's campaign, his assassination, the aftermath of grief and disorientation. They were reconnecting, sharing memories, attempting to process trauma through the simple act of being together. There was food, there was alcohol, not excessive by the standards of the time, but enough that judgment may have been impaired. There was music, there was laughter. For a few hours, the weight of tragedy lifted. They were simply people enjoying a summer evening. Ted Kennedy was the host, but those present later recalled that he seemed distracted, preoccupied. His mind appeared to be elsewhere. He participated in conversations but without full engagement, as though part of him was already calculating something, already moving toward a decision that had not yet been made conscious. At approximately 11:15 p.m., Kennedy announced that he was tired and wanted to return to his hotel in Edgartown on Martha's Vineyard. The last ferry ran at midnight. If he wanted to catch it, he needed to leave soon. Mary Jo asked if she could get a ride. She also wanted to return to her hotel. Kennedy agreed. This moment, this simple, ordinary decision, would become one of the most scrutinized moments in American political history. Why did they leave together? What were Kennedy's intentions? Was this genuinely just a practical arrangement, or was something else happening? The guests watched them leave. Some later reported an uneasy feeling, a sense that something was not quite right, though they could not articulate why. It was just 2 people leaving a party to catch a ferry. It should have been unremarkable. They walked to Kennedy's car, a black Oldsmobile Delmont 88. Mary Jo got in, Kennedy got in. The engine started, the headlights cut through the darkness, and they drove away from the cottage, away from the safety of witnesses and normalcy, toward a decision point that neither of them yet understood was approaching. The road ahead was straightforward. Chappaquiddick Road led directly to the ferry landing. Any driver familiar with the island would have had no difficulty following it. But at an intersection, Kennedy turned onto Dike Road, a narrow, unpaved dirt road that led not toward the ferry, but toward Dike Bridge, a small wooden structure crossing Poucha Pond. Why did he make this turn? This question has never been satisfactorily answered. Kennedy claimed it was a mistake, that he was unfamiliar with the roads and became confused. But critics immediately questioned this explanation. The turn was clearly marked. The road surface changed from pavement to dirt. Kennedy had been on the island earlier that day and had driven across Dike Bridge during a swimming excursion. The alternative explanation, the one whispered but never proven, was that Kennedy deliberately sought privacy, that the ferry was a pretext, that his intentions were something other than simply giving Mary Jo a ride to catch the last boat. We cannot know. What we know is that the Oldsmobile proceeded down Dike Road, bouncing over ruts, heading toward the bridge through darkness broken only by headlights. Dike Bridge was narrow, only 10 feet wide with no guardrails, sitting at a slight angle to the road. During the day with good visibility, it required careful navigation. At night, with no street lights, it was treacherous. The car approached. Kennedy would later claim he did not see the bridge until too late, that he suddenly realized the road was ending and the bridge was there, and he was going too fast. Investigators would determine the car was traveling approximately 20 to 25 miles per hour, not recklessly fast by normal standards, but too fast for the conditions, too fast to make the slight turn required to align with the bridge's angle. The car did not make the turn. It went off the right side of the bridge. For a moment it was airborne, and then it hit the water with tremendous force, flipping as it fell, landing upside down with a crash that must have been deafening inside the vehicle. The pond at this point was 6 to 8 feet deep, not deep enough to completely submerge the car, but deep enough that it settled with its roof on the muddy bottom and its wheels pointing toward the sky. The windows were open or shattered by impact. Water rushed in immediately, cold and black, filling the vehicle with terrifying speed. Inside, in darkness and shock and rising water, 2 people fought for their lives. Ted Kennedy would later testify that he escaped through a window, that he was disoriented, didn't know which way was up, struggled against the current and his own confusion, that he finally broke free, reached the surface, gasped air, and Mary Jo Kopechne did not escape. She remained in the car as it settled, as the water rose, as the air pockets shrank. She found space in the back seat, near the footwell, where a pocket of air remained. She pushed her face into this space, tilting her head back, breathing what little oxygen was left, waiting. Waiting for Ted Kennedy to bring help, waiting for rescue divers, waiting for someone to understand that time was critical, that every second mattered, that she was alive but would not remain alive unless someone came soon. She waited. The air slowly turned toxic. The cold seeped into her bones. The darkness was absolute, and no one came. Ted Kennedy pulled himself onto the shore of Poucha Pond. He was soaking wet, disoriented, in shock. According to his later testimony, he dove repeatedly, trying to reach Mary Jo, trying to open doors, trying to pull her from the vehicle. He claimed the current was too strong, the water too dark, his efforts futile. How much of this is true, we will never know. What is known is that Ted Kennedy stood on that shore, breathing air that Mary Jo could not breathe, and he faced a choice. The choice was simple: call for help immediately or do something else. He chose something else. He began walking back toward the cottage, approximately 1.5 miles. Along this route, he passed at least 4 houses with lights on. At any of these houses, he could have knocked, asked to use a phone, reported the accident. Professional rescue divers could have been dispatched immediately. Mary Jo might have been saved. He did not stop at any of these houses. When he reached the cottage, he found Joe Gargan and Paul Markham. In a quiet conversation away from the other guests, he told them what had happened. The 3 men drove back to Dike Bridge. Gargan and Markham dove into the water, attempting to reach the submerged car. Like Kennedy, they failed. At this point, approximately midnight, 45 minutes after the accident, 3 men knew that a woman was trapped underwater. 3 men understood that professional help was needed urgently. None of them called the police. None of them reported the accident. None of them initiated a rescue operation. Instead, Gargan and Markham drove Kennedy to the ferry landing. The ferry had stopped running, but Kennedy, an experienced swimmer, dove into the channel and swam across to Edgartown. He returned to his hotel. He was seen by the hotel owner at approximately 2:25 a.m., fully clothed, acting as though establishing an alibi. He went to his room. He did not call the police. He took a bath. He changed clothes. He went to bed, or pretended to. The hours passed. The sun rose. Ted Kennedy had breakfast. He spoke to other hotel guests. He appeared relatively normal, if somewhat distracted. It was not until 9:45 a.m., more than 10 hours after the accident, that Ted Kennedy walked into the Edgartown police station and reported that his car had gone off Dike Bridge with Mary Jo Kopechne inside. By that time, Mary Jo had been dead for hours. By that time, 2 fishermen had already discovered the overturned car. By that time, a diver named John Farrar had already entered the water and found her body positioned in the back seat, her face pressed upward toward the shrinking air pocket, her hands positioned as though she had been pushing herself higher, trying to keep breathing, trying to stay alive just a little longer. Farrar would later testify that the air pocket could have sustained Mary Jo for at least an hour, possibly 2 hours after the crash. He stated his professional opinion that if rescue divers had been called immediately, Mary Jo Kopechne could have been saved. She did not die instantly. She died slowly. She died waiting. She died because Ted Kennedy chose not to call for help, chose to protect himself rather than risk the questions that would come from explaining why he was driving down that road with her at that hour. The news exploded across America within hours. Another Kennedy tragedy. But as details emerged, the 10-hour delay, the failure to call for help, the questions about why Kennedy was on that road, the narrative shifted from tragedy to scandal. The media descended on Martha's Vineyard. Reporters tracked down everyone who had been at the party. The boiler room girls who had come seeking closure found themselves trapped in a nightmare of scrutiny and suspicion. Ted Kennedy hired lawyers immediately. The Kennedy family machinery activated, the same apparatus that had managed crises for decades, that knew how to shape narratives, control information, minimize political damage. 1 week after the accident, Kennedy appeared on national television wearing a neck brace, claiming a concussion, though the timing and severity of this injury would be questioned. He delivered a carefully scripted statement expressing remorse while avoiding clear admission of culpability. He described the accident as tragic, his behavior afterward as the result of shock and confusion. He asked the people of Massachusetts whether he should resign. The response was divided. Some saw a man genuinely shattered by trauma. Others saw a calculated performance, an attempt to evade accountability. The legal proceedings were carefully managed. The inquest was held in secret. The investigation was narrow. Kennedy ultimately pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident, a misdemeanor. He received a 2-month suspended sentence. He served no time. He paid no substantial fine. For Mary Jo's parents, Joseph and Gwen Kopechne, the outcome was devastating. Their daughter was dead. The man who had been driving faced essentially no consequences. The questions that haunted them, why that road? Could she have been saved? Were never adequately answered. Behind the scenes, they were pressured to remain quiet, to accept the official narrative, to not challenge the Kennedys. The machinery of power that had failed to save Mary Jo now worked to protect the man who had left her to die. Ted Kennedy survived Chappaquiddick politically in the short term. He was re-elected in 1970, but his presidential ambitions were destroyed. In 1972, when Democrats needed a candidate, Kennedy declined. In 1976, he again declined. Chappaquiddick loomed over everything, the unanswered questions, the sense that there was more to the story, the political vulnerability. He finally ran in 1980, challenging President Carter, but Chappaquiddick haunted the campaign. In an interview with Roger Mudd, Kennedy struggled to explain why he wanted to be president and what had really happened that night. He appeared defensive, evasive, unprepared. The interview was disastrous. He lost the nomination. He never ran for president again. The Kennedy dynasty, built over 3 generations, effectively ended on Dike Bridge. Ted served in the Senate until his death in 2009, becoming one of the most effective legislators in American history. He championed healthcare, education, civil rights. He achieved remarkable things. But he never became president. He never escaped Chappaquiddick. The scandal remained inseparable from his legacy, and Mary Jo Kopechne remained forever 28. Her potential unfulfilled, her story reduced to a footnote, her death serving primarily as a chapter in someone else's tragedy. Chappaquiddick took its place in the Kennedy-cursed narrative immediately. But it was different from the assassinations, different from the accidents. This tragedy was self-inflicted, the direct result of Ted Kennedy's choices. Perhaps the curse was not external, but internal. Perhaps the Kennedy family's repeated tragedies were the result of a culture that valued ambition over ethics, power over responsibility, dynasty over individual lives. Ted Kennedy lived with Chappaquiddick for 40 years. Friends reported he was haunted, that he struggled with guilt, that he understood he had failed fundamentally. When he was diagnosed with cancer in 2008, when he knew he was dying, he wrote letters attempting to make amends. Whether he found peace, only he knew. He died in August 2009 at 77. The nation mourned him as a legislative giant, but even the tributes mentioned Chappaquiddick. 40 years had passed and the scandal remained. The water off Dike Bridge is still cold and black. The current still runs strong. The bridge has been rebuilt with guardrails, but the site remains a destination for those who want to stand where history fractured. What actually happened? Despite decades of investigation, fundamental questions remain unanswered. Why did Kennedy turn onto that road? Could Mary Jo have been saved? What occurred during those 10 hours? We are left with tragedy in multiple dimensions. Mary Jo's death, a life cut short, potential unfulfilled, family denied justice, Ted's moral failure, choosing self-preservation over doing right, the system's failure, allowing wealth and power to purchase different justice. Chappaquiddick reveals uncomfortable truths about privilege, about dynasties, about how some escape consequences that would destroy ordinary people. But it also reveals power's limits. Kennedy escaped prosecution, he kept his Senate seat, but he never became president. He never fulfilled his family's expectations. He never escaped the shadow of that night. The tragedy persists unresolved. Mary Jo remains dead, her story reduced to scandal. Ted remains a contradiction, legislative giant and moral failure. The Kennedy family remains marked by tragedy, suggesting the curse they carried was generated from within. The water is still black, the current still runs strong. And somewhere in that darkness, the memory of what was lost, not just a life, but justice, truth, and the possibility of redemption, still waits, still asks us to remember. What would you have done if you had been Ted Kennedy on that shore? Would you have called for help immediately, accepting whatever consequences came? Or would you have calculated, as he did, prioritizing your future over someone else's life? And if we are honest with ourselves, if we examine our own capacity for self-preservation in moments of crisis, can we truly say we would have chosen differently? These are the questions Chappaquiddick asks us. These are the uncomfortable truths it forces us to confront about power, privilege, and the choices we make when no one is watching.